Hello there, YouTube. So, I was watching a video by Razorfist. He's a YouTuber I've been following for quite some time, and he was talking about mainly about comics and the comics industry, and how he views the culture wars, so to speak, that seems to be going on in most forms of media, and he makes a really, really good point about how we should be approaching this issue. We should not be approaching this so-called culture war as a reason to complain and moan about media we don't like. We should instead be approaching it from the other direction. We should just be making more media. Politics is one thing, but culture trumps politics. Culture comes first. Politics comes later. I know this because my politics is very much informed by the culture I've consumed. I very, very early on played the video game Final Fantasy VII, and the themes of Final Fantasy VII are very environmental. It's very much about environmentalism, the damage that we do to the planet in order to extract resources and run our power stations. And from a very young age, that became a focus for my political beliefs. I was very, very interested in what they built an allegory for, because what they built there was very, very different. Like, fossil fuels didn't exist in that world. In the Final Fantasy world, they had Mako, which was this life force of the universe that was in a stream called the life stream, and that would be consumed by power generators and turned into electricity. But at the same time, it could also be crystallined down into small stones, which could then be used to channel magic. So it was not oil. It was very much not oil. But it was a good enough oil allegory. And the way that certain corporations would just willfully drain the entirety of the land around certain areas, killing life effectively, draining the life force out of that part of the world, just so that they could get even more energy, was a noticeable visual for me. It was something that stuck with me. So I was an environmentalist throughout my 20s. I joined the Green Party. I was very, very environmentally focused. And I still consider myself an environmentalist even today. It's something that I've always cared about. I have noticed a lot of flaws. I'm no longer part of the Green Party because they didn't focus on environmentalism. I don't like the way the environmentalist lobby seems to be obsessing over the meat industry and blaming cattle for global warming, which doesn't make any sense. Because cows are carbon neutral. They have to be. And I don't even need to provide you with a source. I can prove it with a thought experiment. Cattle fart and burp, and that releases gases into the atmosphere. And those are greenhouse gases. Thing is, that carbon in the atmosphere, which that methane breaks down into carbon dioxide, and then that carbon dioxide gets absorbed by various different things. But where did it originally come from? So the cow's not chewing on coal, is it? It's not a coal-powered cow. So it's not trapped carbon. The carbon must have come from somewhere. And it came from the cow's muscles and tissues. It came from the cow's digestive guts. It came from the cow itself. And where did the cow build that carbon from? Well, from what it eats. So grass and hay. And where did we get that from? Well, it grew out of the ground. But plants don't take carbon out of the ground. They take nitrates and sulfates out of the ground. They don't take carbon out of the ground. Where do they get the carbon from? Well, they scrub it out of the air, don't they? They take carbon dioxide in. Because plants don't respire the way we do. They use photosynthesis. So the grass and the hay and whatever else, whatever we've made the cattle feed out of, which is more plant matter, all those plants, they took in carbon from the air. They took the air, carbon, into the grass. Then that was eaten by the cow, and then the cow farted it back out. And then it broke down to carbon dioxide, which gets absorbed by the grass. It's a circle. Think about it. No carbon is being lost in this process. No carbon is going anywhere else. Right? We're not suddenly generating a big lump of coal to store the carbon, and we're not burning a big lump of coal to get rid of carbon. So the only carbon that's going into the cow is coming from grass, and the only carbon that goes into the grass is coming from the air. So all the carbon that the cow is farting back into the atmosphere is carbon that was in the atmosphere a generation of cows ago. So long as the cows stay relatively stable, there should be around the same amount of carbon, regardless, because there'll still be the same amount of carbon being taken in by grass and hay that'll be eaten by cows. And even if you then increase the size of the herd, which would increase the number of farts, that's true, yeah, but that would also increase the amount of grass that's being eaten, which would increase the amount of carbon dioxide being taken out of the atmosphere. So it'll still stay stable. So cows must be carbon neutral. They must be. Now, yes, the cars and trucks and the other vehicles that are involved in the meat industry, refrigeration, the factories that process everything, the abattoirs, those are not going to be carbon neutral. Those are going to require energy, and they're going to get energy from the power grid, and the power grid's going to get that from a power plant, which is likely getting that from fossil fuels. Thing is, that's also true of any grain, or any pulse, or any nut. So yeah. Also, then there's the water issue. That it takes something like 1,000 pints of water to make 1 pint of milk, except it doesn't. Because the water, yeah, it goes into the cow, but it comes back out of the cow. Statistically, if you get a glass of water, there will be a molecule of that water in your glass that at some point passed through the bladder of Oliver Cromwell. Because there aren't that many molecules of water on Earth compared to how many we drink. The water goes in us and then it comes back out. So that's what urination is. We use the water, processes happen, and then we excrete water. Water passes through us. It doesn't stay in us. We don't just expand like a balloon. Now, yes, the water leaves with other stuff in it, but that's the way it always is. That water will then go into the water cycle. It'll go into various different water tables. It'll end up out to sea. Then it'll evaporate off and it'll get rained down onto a mountain and the fresh water will flow. So long as you're not using the fresh water faster than it can be replenished by the weather cycle, it doesn't matter how much water it takes to grow anything. So unless you have a limited amount of water in a region, then you could argue this water can't be used for cattle farming. We need it for this thing instead because we only have so much fresh water per time frame. That's an argument that you can make. But it does not cost water. Water is not a finite resource. Water is infinite. We have infinite water. We have water over time. We have a finite amount of water per month or per year. But water in general, we've got as much as we want. Then there's the argument about, well, we could use the land that we grow cattle on to grow crops, and we could feed twice as many people with a lot less cost. But again, you can't because pound for pound, the protein you get from beef is significantly more nutritional than a pound's worth of any vegetable you could grow. Additionally, almost all cattle farms are grown on marginal land, and marginal land can't be used for crop farming. The soil quality isn't good enough, the water tables aren't good enough, and the land isn't flat enough. It's not farmable land. It's often hilly, and it's often rocky, and the grass that grows there is the only thing that will grow there. Which means that what you actually have is marginal land rather than arable land. Arable land is what you can grow crops on. Marginal land you can use for cattle farming. You can use it for pig farms and things like that. You can use it to raise chickens, but you can't use it to grow crops. So if we didn't use it for animal husbandry, if we didn't use it for the meat industry, what would we use it for? because we can't grow anything else on it. We can't grow crops on it. It's not useful for that. And we don't want to build yet more cities on it. We already have enough people. So there's no other real use for it. So yeah, they're talking out their arse. What we could do is we could, instead of burning biofuels in place of oils, if we turned all the biofuel crops into food crops, that would feed a hell of a lot of people, given that almost 20% of the world's crops now are biofuels. Biofuel does not need to exist. We can transition to the electric car, and we can charge cars from national grids, and the national grids can be powered by nuclear power plants, which are the cleanest, safest, and most efficient form of power by far. And we can supplement nuclear power with solar power, which, if we were to actually set up big solar farms in places like Texas, Southern California, Mexico, Egypt, the Middle East, massive parts of India and southern China, they would be able to provide so much energy that they could almost be completely solar powered. Those areas of the world, the amount of power that you can generate in the tropics and around the equator is absurdly high. So yeah, you can easily supplement power with nuclear and solar. You don't need anything else. Nuclear power is the cleanest, the safest, the most efficient by far. We should all be adopting nuclear power, and the fact that most green initiatives and most environmental groups are anti-nuclear power is absurd. It really is. Most people don't even know how safe it is. They think millions of people have been affected by nuclear power. They think thousands and thousands of people died in Chernobyl. They didn't. It didn't. It was 160. 160. That includes the people who died of long-term cancer. Like the people who are only tangentially connected, who might have maybe had the cancer because of Chernobyl. They could have got cancer anyway. 160. More people die in a few weeks because of the coal industry. More people die per coal mine than have died ever from nuclear power. More people die falling off wind farms. So yeah, that's environmentalism for you. Now that wasn't my intention in this video to talk about that kind of thing. But yeah, I was watching this video by Razorfist. It was an entertaining video. He talks about the comic industry and how politics comes after culture. So you develop politics by influencing culture, and rather than complaining that our culture is being usurped by a bunch of social justice types that just want to push identity politics all the time, why don't we just make our own culture, our own cultural icons? Take something that's ours and keep it as ours. They're going to end up running away and ruining, Marvel and Star Trek, and they'll take anything else that we've found we like, and they'll twist it. Because that's what Hollywood does, that's what the comic book industry does, that's what literature is doing. We've spoken about this before. We know all of this, but if we're prepared to fund other things, we can get far, far better material. So I have been looking up other forms of media. And actually, I said in my previous video that I've bought a couple of books about the Old West, and there is a Western that is being produced by the Daily Wire with Gina Carano in it, which is apparently really good. I now have a subscription to the Daily Wire. I'm going to give that a watch and see what I think. But I do think that there is a backlash now. There are enough people going, you know what, we're sick of this. We're going to make our own stuff. And I'm glad about that. I'm glad to see that there is a pushback against any group. If any one political group owns all of culture, owns the entire cultural zeitgeist, you end up with stagnation anyway. I do also think, though, there is pushback inside the industry, and I think one of my biggest arguments for that is Top Gun Maverick. I had seen Top Gun before. It was when I was a kid. I didn't really remember it. So I watched it again. And Top Gun is kind of crap, if I'm honest. It's stylistic. It's got really no substance to it, though. It's Tom Cruise in a plane, just being Tom Cruise in a plane for 2 hours. There's no real story to it. It is quite boring at times, but it's filmed like a music video. So it's got a bit of popcorn entertainment value to it. The storyline is very, very simple. It's Tom Cruise in a plane, being a pilot. He goes to this academy where he's supposedly, training to be the best of the best. This is the top 1% school. And he wants the trophy of being the best in his class. And the other guy, who's called Iceman, played by Val Kilmer, is his obvious competition. And we already know from the very beginning it's either going to be Maverick or Iceman who ends up at number 1. No one else has a chance because narrative doesn't even bother to highlight them. And then there's a death in the story, and there's a bit of grief and a little bit of self-reflection, and that's about it. That's all that happens. It's very, very trite and obvious and a bit boring. It's not badly written at all, but it's just fine. But it was in the middle of the 80s, and that was the standard for the 80s. So as an 80s film, it's fine. I have no issue with Top Gun. Top Gun Maverick, on the other hand. Top Gun Maverick took the style and the characters and the setting of the first Top Gun, which were the bits that really worked, as well as the soundtrack, which is what helped give it that style. And then it added a plot. It added a narrative with stakes and characters and a well-built rising tension with payoffs and subversions and little send-ups all throughout it. It was genuinely one of the best films I've seen in years. One of the standout action films of the decade. I'll say that right now. This is an example of what happens when you go back to basics. Take an old style film and just build on it, improve on it. I cannot think of a better way that they could have taken Top Gun and done it justice. So yeah, that is a great example of what you can do if you don't focus on politics. If you don't focus on making it all identity politics, I do think the backlash against that is happening, and I think Top Gun Maverick is that backlash, and it's a fantastic backlash. I highly recommend the film. So yeah, I saw that a couple of days ago. I thought you'd like to hear about it. I do highly recommend it, and I recommend the video by Razorfist as well, which I'll link in the description below. He describes the way that he approaches various different media. He also talks about his book, which I have over there. One moment, I'm just going to go get it. So, this is Razorfist's book. It is called The Long Moonlight, Night Vale Book 1. I'm not sure what to make of it yet. I've not read it yet, but it's not overly long. It's a pulp noir book. I'm going to give this a try. Tell you what I think. My reading has been a bit different recently, actually. I did start out this year with a plan for the whole year, and I would like to keep to it. But I'm not going to. I know I'm not. And July is proof of this, which I'll explain in another video soon. But I think I'm going to have to accept that I'm going to have to just read as I feel the urge. I'm going to have to jump from book to book and just read what I want to read when I want to read it. Because trying to keep to a proper TBR is just not working for me. Even when that TBR is only 1 or 2 books, if I know in advance what I'm supposed to be reading, I suddenly don't want to read it. So I would like to give this a read sometime soon. It might be the next thing I pick up and read. Who knows? I do still want to read all of the books on that TBR. I was supposed to be reading the First Law trilogy this month. This month has not gone the way I intended, and I still haven't even picked them up yet. I didn't even start. So this summer has been very, very weird reading-wise. I have been reading, I've just not been reading the books that I intended to read. So I'm going to go through them in a bit of a wrap-up and discuss what I'm going to do from now on reading-wise. Because I still want to keep to some of the books that I'm reading there. I've still got loads of books that are on my quasi-TBR. But I can't just go ahead and set a set number of books that I'm definitely going to read. I can't be deciding what I'm reading in December, in the beginning of the year, or in March or something like that anymore. I can't be doing that because that ends up with me losing interest. I spend months planning to read these books, and then by the time I get to them, I'm not interested in them anymore. The luster has fallen away. Instead, there's another book that I'm looking at as a forbidden book, sitting there on the shelf at me going, ooh, I sound like an interesting concept. And I'm like, yeah, but I've already picked out all the books I'm going to read for like the next 8 months. So you have to wait until next year. It's like, oh, but you want to read me now. And I'm like, yeah, damn you. So I can't keep doing this because I see a book and I'll suddenly go, ooh, I think I fancy that. You can do that with films. You can do that with TV shows. You can just decide, you know what, I fancy watching that film. It's one day. It's a 2-hour period. You press play. The film's done. You can go back to what else you were watching. If you're doing a big watch party of, say, the Marvel films, or if you're trying to watch all of Star Trek from start to finish, and you suddenly get a hankering to watch The Matrix, or something along those lines, you can watch that film, and it just takes 1 day out of your thing. You can go back to what you were doing before. Can't really do that with a book, and not unless it's a tiny little thing. So I think I'm going to have to just start mood reading and see how that works for me. Right, well, I'll let you know, and I'll see you next time. Bye.